All right, Mike Nichols, staff product designer, working on manage, organize, and we're going to be talking about what an organization is today. So real quickly, the workspace group, formerly workspace group, is now called the organization group. Announced it on Slack, but just another public service announcement here. Also, a couple of things. User profile and topics. Turns out we are responsible for those. We don't spend much time working on those, but technically those do fall to our group. So, little public service announcement there. All right. So, what is an organization? An organization is a workspace. That's it. Whole presentation. Easy peasy, right? No, so like I said, we recently renamed the group organization, but we also are renaming the feature workspace to an organization. So for a slightly better answer than that, let's look at all of the containers and see how they fit together. And you're going to hear me see the word containers a lot. All of these things that we talk about, groups, projects, organizations, are containers. They're not features themselves. They are more houses of features. So they themselves don't necessarily do anything. They're just a collection of things. So first, let's take a look at a project. What is a project? It's a place to do work, it's a place to track work, and it's a place to manage your work. Things like settings and permissions. It's really a convenient, oops, this got changed. That's an, yeah, sorry. That slide got changed. But it's really just a way of applying settings and tracking things across the project. Its scope is the project itself. That's where its concern is. It's related to the project. What is a group? It is really just a place to organize projects, right? So it's a grouping of projects. It's a place to track work across projects, place to manage settings, but again, across projects. So it really is just a convenient way to track and manage multiple projects at the same time. So moving up the level, what is a top level group? Much the same as a group, it does the same things, except for it is for all of your work, all of your projects, place to manage all of your settings. It also has a few extra things in it, like a place to manage members, and it's a place to manage your subscription. So it is a place to track and manage all projects. It is aligned with the needs of a company more so than a group or a project. It's more focused on the company needs. And this is true on SaaS, not necessarily on self-managed. So what is the admin? So it's an additional way to track work across some of the projects. It does have a few additional settings. Place to manage users, subscription. It also, what top level groups don't have is it's a place to manage your instance itself. So some of the settings that apply to how your instance actually runs. So it's a place to track, but mostly manage all of the projects, and it is aligned with the needs of the company on self-managed. So with all of those in place, what is an organization? Well, I think the easiest way to explain that is to go back to a top level group, and let's make a few edits here. So what is an organization? It is a top level group. It will be replacing top level groups. And then you'll notice the plus signs here, here, and here. So it really is just a few more ways to track, a few more settings, a few more permissions. So it is a place to track work and manage projects aligned with the needs of a company on both SaaS and self-managed. So what we'll do is combine those so it's a consistent experience across both of those having the same object. So let's look at this from a feature perspective. So the first thing you'll notice is it is a lot. So what we're looking at here is the G's mean it comes from a group, an A means it comes from admin, and a B means that it's in both. So you can see there is a decent amount of overlap. Most of the additions feature-wise are kind of in the manage grouping here, and more on what these groupings are about on the upcoming slides. But one thing that was interesting as I was putting this together, Chris actually noticed this, was we often talk about organizations as adding admin functionality into top level groups. But we also see here, there's a lot of things in groups that it's actually moving up to, up from the group level. So by the combination of a top-level group and an admin, you're actually getting a lot of the functionality that groups do that admins don't. So that's a look at it from the feature perspective. So what does an organization look like? Let's look at some UI. So to do that, first we want to start with a top-level group, since that's kind of what it's based off of. And for the sake of production, I've stopped using the old menus and I've started using the new menus from the navigation work that the Foundations team. Mostly because of the groupings that I mentioned earlier, it just makes it easier to work with, and we'll go from there. So if you haven't seen this before, this isn't necessarily suggested that this is from the organization. This comes from the Foundations team and the navigation work that they're doing here. So if we have the group from based on the new navigation, first we're going to relabel and we're going to add in a few features from the admin. So an example here is if we have an existing grouping, let's say analytics, this is just for example, I just kind of pulled one out. This grouping here, analytics, has a few things in there. One of the things that admin has that groups do not is DevOps reports. So some things will just be straight additions of features. In other cases, we're going to need to add in wholesale sections. So in this case, the manage section that we talked about earlier, also the possibility of a system down there. But in general, as we move these features over, almost all of them, well, most of them are going to be straight one-to-one copies, meaning like if a screen looked like this in the admin and it moves over into an organization, it's going to stay very much the same. There's not necessarily a need to redo those. Eventually, we might want to look at redoing some of these pages, but it's not necessarily part of this process here. Also of note, like, while topics is something that the organization group does, most of these screens are not our responsibility. So like, let's say if it was a CI/CD screen, that moving process and that redesign and any tweaks that would need to be made, that would be on the CI/CD team, not necessarily on us. But there are a few features. These are mostly the ones, if we go back to the categorization, the both, where sometimes there is a feature at the group level and there's a feature at the admin level that basically do the same things. Members and users is kind of an example of that. There's a membership screen at the group level, there is a user screen at the admin level. In those cases, we are going to have to figure out how they get combined together. Mostly it will be the one that has a more feature-rich type of thing, and we'll adopt that one and adjust it for the organization level. So everything I've been mentioning has kind of been talking about like features. By features, I mean like things that are actually in the left-hand navigation. But everything I just said also applies to settings. Mostly what is in the admin is settings. So the settings is going to get quite a few more settings compared to the groups from the admin settings. This is still a bit of a work in progress. As you can see, there is a lot of items on there. So how do you get to an organization? So again, I am leveraging the new navigation here. So apologies if you haven't seen this before and this is all a little confusing. But we're exploring a number of ways. One, it'll probably be the root item in the breadcrumbs. We have looked into an admin specific flow that kind of replicates what self-managed gets now, giving them a way back to the organization, keeping that consistent experience. And we've also looked at the groups in the projects page. There might be an opportunity to leverage those pages as kind of anchor point to show the groups mostly, but also projects kind of stem from the organization. So we might add them in on that page as well. So looking at it from a more philosophical standpoint, what is an organization? It is a consistent experience between self-managed and SaaS. It is efficiency, allowing features to benefit more users. Let me expand on that one a little bit. So Efficiency is normally talked about as engineering efficiency. So right now we're building things sometimes up to 3 times at 3 different levels, which obviously requires a lot more engineering work. By combining these together in a single object that applies to both self-managed and that, we'll be able to reduce engineering time. But that also applies to like documentation, design work, just tracking things. And not just like existing features and more people getting more access to it. As we improve those features over time, those features will propagate to more places. So really is an efficient way to kind of streamline the work and stop building things multiple times. To a user, what it really is, it's an anchor that solves a lot of indirect user experience problems. So by the lack of the existence of kind of a true root home, a few user experience problems have popped up. So this will be kind of the solution to those. Although not directly related to them, it will allow us to indirectly solve those. So really, what is an organization? It's the container that GitLab has been missing. So thanks to everyone who's been working on this, especially Christina, my PM. We've been fighting the fight on this and doing a lot of work on this, and she has joined the team and really helped us get there. But also Nick, I've been collaborating very heavily with him, and obviously all of the screens that you saw were based on his work, and all of the foundations team really is mostly the UI that I'm working with there. So big thanks to him. Any questions?
I have the first question. First of all, thanks for this. This is a huge body of work and one I've been very interested in for a long time. I'm curious about user management on the organization level and how that will work, whether it'll be more similar to a group today, where you can only manage direct members versus admin users, which is a sort of aggregate of all users anywhere within the instance.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, or maybe not glad you brought that up, because as I was making this presentation, it dawned on me that we had been talking about the possibility of memberships, and that might be one of the first things we move over. But based on our inheritance, that does set up a bit of a problem. If it's a top level group and you're a member of the top level group, you're a member of everything below it. Ergo, you may not be possible to be a member at the organization level. So it's likely going to be more of the user management that exists in the current admin, and membership probably won't be a possibility at the organization level, or we'll just have to make it so it doesn't inherit, but that has problems in its own right, in that then you'd be able to see everything that rolls up there. So it gets into a bit of a permission problem. So it more than likely is going to have to be just users there and not actually members.
Yeah, I was going to ask about inheritance because I think that's something we see a lot of confusion about with SaaS customers, that they expect to sort of have a like admin users list, but because of inheritance on top level groups, that's not what they're seeing on the top level groups members. So that might be a larger effort to address, but something
Inheritance
I just bring up
has been a big one. I had to cut it out of this presentation to fit it in there, but
yeah,
it could probably be its own talk in its own right. It's a big topic.
Austin, you have the next question.
Yeah, thanks. So I can see how this makes it valuable to specifically like .com users, because some of these admin-like features are kind of trapped in the admin area. But I was curious, Mike, if you have thought through like how will this be handled for self-managed? So I remember there was like a community contribution around adding topics to the admin area. The goal was to make it so that you could have these universal topics accessible to every project. So if I was a self-managed user or self-managed administrator, and I wanted to create topics for all of my projects, how would I do that? Is it like a root organization for just self-manage, or how does that work?
Yeah, so that is one of the last sticking points that we have, is trying to figure out how to deal with self-management and mostly the migration process of it. Long term, think of admin going away, although that's not entirely true because you still need to have like some admin, for instance, for like hardware settings and things like that. But really, it would be a replacement of that. So it will be all of the features and admin will now go to organization. In fact, that admin link in the sidebar eventually will probably go to the organization, not to what is known today as the admin. And so while that in itself isn't necessarily a benefit to self-managed users, I think they'll get their benefits from two places. One, like I said, the efficiency of us developing things, right? So as features get developed, a lot of times they'll get developed at the group level, and those improvements won't make their way into the corresponding screen in the admin level. So they'll get feature improvements along the way. But also, what I was mentioning about the groups, having a central localized place to see, like, we got a lot of requests of like, we want to add this kind of tracking. When I say tracking, I mean things like epics and milestones and things like that, things that don't exist, that exist at the group level, but don't exist at the admin level, even though they technically do, because you do have a top level group, and in theory you could see all that. That lack of a centralized anchor point, it kind of makes it seem like there isn't a way to track all of that stuff. So by combining those two things together, of having both the settings and kind of the tracking stuff in one localized or one consolidated place, I think is where they'll start seeing the experience benefits.
Okay, gotcha. So it sounds like you still got to think through some of the kinks of it, but there will be hypothetically like one organization boxing around everything. So there's still that level of power, I guess you could say, because I feel like the GitLab administrators still need to control that level of GitLab, even if it's not hardware. It could just be like the sign-in message, or if you're a self-managed user and you want to have topics for every single project, there would still be some way to do that, but you just haven't figured out exactly what that's going to look like yet.
Yeah, and also like users that aren't in your organization, which sounds like a weird, well, how would anybody be that? But especially on .com, there are non, they belong to no group at this point, users. So yeah, there'll always be some that are outside of the organization, but by and large, you'll set, like you said, your sign-in screen and all that stuff, all your preferences and all that thing, that will all move into the organization, into kind of a centralized place.
Got it.
I have the next question. It'll be really quick. It's just wondering how we communicate those like cool changes to the user. Like most of them, I think, are self-explanatory, but explorable by the user, and maybe like we can assist them anyway in the UI or just mainly release post.
It's the plan until earlier this week was to replicate features in the admin and in the organization, allowing them to kind of not need to make the transition until the transition happens. And when that transition would happen, we basically would replace the links of admin and go to that. Unfortunately, that might prove to be a bit of an engineering challenge. So what we're not trying to do is, in a world where we're trying to get more efficient and write less code, not write a whole bunch more code for the transition period that ultimately becomes dead code. So we don't know. We're trying to figure that one out right now. We thought we had a plan on that, but engineering, it might very well be, as you described, kind of when features get moved over, there's kind of a hotspot or like a relocation kind of message type of thing there, but TBD.
Yeah, cool. Like just idea that I was thinking, because I did similar things with deprecation features, that like since we are very open with our issue with new features, is there a possibility that we have a blog post or something to the user, like upcoming months, those will be changed so they're prepared of something with like major changes like this? That's a possibility maybe to consider.
Yep, those are great suggestions.
Yeah, I know we're over time, but finally, I just wanted to ask if there's been any solution validation done yet with various personas that span the stages.
No, not necessarily. There was a when we went through the rename, there was a lot of research that was done there about the naming, and there currently is a somewhat parallel effort going on as Bitpods is very dependent on organizations, or could leverage it, I guess maybe is a better way of saying that. So we're trying to get kind of a sentiment read of the impacts of this and that. We haven't done a tremendous amount of testing yet, as we figured out most of the stuff, but we haven't put it down into UI, and we'll get there, but we're not quite there yet.
Cool. I wonder if there's even a way to like set up some questions to like hand off to the stage designers, even like, because I'm going to be doing a moderated solution validation study, and I could, if there's time at the end, like add some questions or say, I want to switch gears entirely now and just show you something that another team of ours is working on. And can you say something about how this would impact you as a security engineer or something like that? Like, I don't know if that's would be interesting to you or helpful, but wanted to throw that out there. It's a possibility.
No, that would be great. Yeah, it has proven to be somewhat of a difficult thing to. It's large. It's hard to think about these things in abstract. It's doesn't fit well into a lot of testing methods. I will say though, most of what we did is based on 5 or so years of issues. So while it's not solution validation, it was the first thing we did was collect the list of problems that have arisen, and we used that as kind of a driving force.
I know my comment in the agenda first said, have you done problem or solution? I'm like, of course they've done problem validation. That's where this whole project came about, is massive amounts of problem validation. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'll reach out, if and when I put that study together, that moderated study, maybe I'll include something about this if it makes sense, or if that would be helpful, but just kind of a gut check.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks all for sticking around. Thanks for the conversation. See y'all later.